Coming up today on Esoteric Atlanta. They placed a plate of food, bread, salt, a slice of cold ham on Abigail's chest, and Elias began to eat. The ritual should have ended there, but Elias froze because he wasn't tasting ham. He was tasting fear. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Esoteric Atlanta. Of course, my name is Brice. I'm doing this episode today in podcast form for a specific reason. First of all, I want to wish all the Americans that are listening right now a very, very happy Thanksgiving. I know this day is fun and exciting, but can also be very challenging for people who have issues with family and whatnot. But despite all of that, I really, from the bottom of my heart, hope that all of you guys had a wonderful, wonderful day. And for our community members who are not Americans, I am very grateful and thankful for you. And so I hope that you had a wonderful Thursday. For this episode today, you guys, because I'm airing this on the evening of Thanksgiving, I'm hoping that for the Americans at least, your bellies are full, you're feeling that sluggish sleepiness of a long, full day of bountiful celebration with your loved ones. And so I wanted to create an episode specifically for us to kind of go back to the roots of why I started this channel, which is really looking at ghost stories, urban legends. In my opinion, as someone who loves history, we learned so much about our culture just through urban legends and ghost stories. And so we're going to go back to that today. This is not necessarily a deep dive. This is more of us sitting around a campfire after eating a full meal, engaging in the old traditions of yore and of what our ancestors used to do. Because what many people don't know is that back historically in the holiday seasons were a time of gathering around and telling ghost stories. We're going to talk a little bit about that before we get into our stories today. But nonetheless, I wanted this episode to be strictly for entertainment, for you to relax and have some fun and maybe get your mind a little intrigued on some of these stories. I would love to hear your thoughts on some of these stories down in the comment section below. And also, I would love to hear if you've heard any of these stories before. I have my own perspective on ghost stories. I do believe they exist, absolutely. I'm someone who's had multiple paranormal experiences, and I think most of these stories are probably very true, just because of the things that I've experienced in my life. And I think there are reasons why we are attracted to these stories, because there is no reasonable explanation, but yet most people have experienced some small amounts, at least, of paranormal phenomenon that they can't explain. And so these stories make us feel less alone and less crazy, and we're trying to figure out a simple explanation as to why these weird things happen, when sometimes there really is no explanation in third density where we are, right? Sometimes it just stays this unsolved mystery. But I also think there's a deeper, more psychological level when it comes to ghost stories and paranormal urban legends. I think that for some of us, the sins and the crimes of humanity are so great that it's easier for us to just project our fears onto a story where we consider the story might be completely made up, if that makes sense. I think that it's easier for us to really focus our fears onto urban legends sometimes and actually accept the horrors that truly do exist in humanity. But nonetheless, we're not going to get into super psychological, political conversation right now. We're just going to have some fun and do what our ancestors did and sit around a fire after the celebration of a holiday and tell these stories, or I'm going to tell these stories. You just sit back and listen. Now, before we get into it, I am going to run a quick quick little advertisement for Fusion Body Studio. Without Fusion Body Studio, I would not be able to do what I do with you guys. And I truly love being here on YouTube and telling these stories. It's my form of art, it's my form of escapism, it's my form of creativity. And so, of course, Fusion Body Studio is equally my love because that's what I do for a living. It's also a form of art as well. And right now, because this is Thanksgiving, the night of Thanksgiving, tomorrow morning, starting November 28th, through December 1 of 2025, we are running a Black Friday sale with 30% off a full year membership or a quarterly year membership. So if you want to give the gift of health and of healing, that is something you can do over at Fusion Body Studio for a loved one or for yourself. If you're buying a membership for a loved one for a Christmas gift, that would be an incredible, I would love to get a Christmas gift like that. Like that is so invaluable, having that Christmas gift. If you're doing it for a loved one, you can contact Paula or me and we can create like a gift card for you, something for you to wrap to give the person. So yeah, I hope you guys do take advantage of our Black Friday sale. So before we get into the episode at hand, here's a quick advertisement from our sponsor, Fusion Body Studio. As always, I also want to thank our Patreons and our producers. We are going to have the reel back, hopefully in December with all the names. But now that we are getting donations on Substack too, we're trying to combine the two. And so be patient with us as we figure out how to combine the two. But I thank you guys so much. You guys are literally the bread and butter of this channel. So also for my audience, thank the Patrons and the producers because they are the ones that also keep this channel going. And if you would like to join our Patreon or our producer community, there's a link below as well as the link to Fusion Body Studio. All right, guys, let's hear a quick word from our sponsor before we get into the episode. Welcome to Fusion Body Studio, the place where movement becomes magic, where your breath becomes power, and where your body becomes the gateway to your spiritual awakening. Let me tell you something most people don't realize. You can't think your way into awakening. You have to move your way into awakening. Ancient traditions knew this. Yogis knew this. Warriors knew this. Your body is not just muscles and bones. It is Shakti, the raw creative force of your soul. And when you move intentionally, when your breath deepens, when your heart fires, when your muscles ignite, you're not just working out. You're awakening prana. You're raising life force. You're activating the energy you were born with. This is where Forska comes in, your inner fire, your spiritual strength. The part of you that rises when life gets hard. The part that says, I am not done. I am not broken. I am just beginning. At Fusion Body Studio, we fuse ancient spiritual science with modern movement. Every class is designed to wake up your pride and reconnect you to the most powerful technology you will ever own, your body. If you felt stuck, lost, disconnected, exhausted, or like you've outgrown your old identity, your body already knows the way out. You just have to activate it. Whether you're new to movement or deeply trained, whether you're rebuilding or leveling up, Fusion Body Studio will meet you exactly where you are and pull you into the strongest, clearest, and most alive version of yourself. And right now, you can give the gift of health this holiday season. From November 28th, 2025 to December 1, 2025, you can get 30% off a full year membership using discount code Black Friday at checkout. This can be for yourself or for someone you love, because awakening is the greatest gift you can give. So if you're ready, truly ready to stop waiting for signs, to stop looking outside of yourself and start awakening the power that's been inside you this whole time, click below. Your prana is rising, your Forska is waking up, your body is calling you home. Welcome to Fusion Body Studio. Winter has always had a certain taste. Part cold air, part wood smoke, part memories we didn't ask to remember. And for thousands of years, long before Santa, long before Christmas trees, winter was a season of ghost, not the trick-or-treat kind, not sheets with eye holes, real ghost. the ones your great-great-grandparents actually believed walk the earth in the darkest weeks of the year. Today we're going to talk about the holiday tradition the world forgot. A tradition older than Christmas itself. A tradition where families gathered around the fire, not to unwrap gifts, but to whisper the names of the dead. The original winter spirits. To understand why winter became a season for ghost stories, you have to step back, way back, to a time when the world didn't have electricity, or highways, or weather apps. Just thunder, hunger, and fear. For Northern Europeans, Celtic, Norse, Germanic, the winter solstice wasn't a celebration. It was a warning. The sun was dying. Nights were growing longer. And people believed the boundary between our world and the next was dissolving, hour by hour. They believed the dead came home in the winter, not to haunt, but to watch. Across ancient Europe, people lit fires, burned herbs, and told frightening stories, not to scare children, but to keep themselves awake while the spirits walked by. Some believed that if you stopped telling the stories, the ghost would come inside. Scandinavian Archive. An elder speaks. The long dark, she brings the old ones. We sit by the fire and tell their stories. If we do not speak of them, they knock on the walls until we do. Ghost stories weren't entertainment. They were tradition, like carving pumpkins or leaving cookies for Santa, an annual act of survival. And when Christianity spread across Europe, the ghost stories didn't stop. They simply got new clothes. The Christmas ghost craze. Fast forward to the 1800s, to the golden age of ghost stories. And yes, I mean Christmas. If you lived in Victorian England, December wasn't just a season for plum pudding. It was the season for hauntings. Magazines published annual Christmas ghost numbers. Newspapers featured chilling holiday tales. And families gathered around the fire, sipping brandy, taking turns telling stories that made the room a little colder. This wasn't some fringe hobby. It was as normal as hanging stockings. Even Charles Dickens, yes, that Dickens, leaned into the tradition. A Christmas Carol wasn't an anomaly. It's one of the many Victorian ghost stories written for Christmas. London, 1898. A Victorian announcer states, "And now, dear listener, our annual Christmas ghost tale. Gather your family near the hearth and perhaps keep the curtains drawn." Imagine it, gas lamps flickering, snow falling outside, a room full of people in wool and lace, quietly listening to Uncle Henry describe the pale woman he saw at the foot of his bed. Ghost stories weren't outliers. They were expected, and the Victorians adored them. No wonder Dickens' ghostly Christmas masterpiece became a classic. He was simply doing what everyone else already loved doing, just better. Why the dead come in December? Every culture has its thin place, the moments when the veil wears down like old fabric. In Japan, winter brings Yuki Onna, the snow woman who appears during blizzards. In Eastern Europe, the dead return during Kaliada, or ancient winter festivals. In Ireland, the dead are invited home with candles and windows. And in Appalachia, the American mountains, winter storytelling is still a living tradition. Ghost stories told by firelight, passed down like quilted patterns. But the reason they survive is simple. Winter is the one time of year when we're forced to remember the dead. empty chairs at the table, holiday traditions that belong to someone who's gone, objects we have unpacked from boxes labeled Christmas, but they feel more like time capsules. Winter makes ghost of all of us. The Appalachian hotline. A caller calls in. Every Christmas Eve, my grandma would leave a place at the table for Uncle Jonah. He died young in a mining accident. She said he still came home in winter. One year we forgot the extra chair, and that night we heard boots on the porch. The American disappearance. So if winter ghost stories were so normal for so long, why don't we tell them now? The answer is simple. Coca-Cola, department stores, and television. By the mid-20th century, Christmas had transformed from a reflective, eerie solstice holiday into a hyper-commercial, family-friendly sugar rush. Ghosts weren't good for sales. Santa was. So Americans pushed its ghost to October and forgot they once belonged to December. But not everyone forgot. The local radio PSA from 1974. A DJ enters. Tonight on KBRI, we're doing something old-fashioned, really old. Christmas ghost stories, just like Grandma used to tell. Tune in at midnight, if you dare. Holiday ghost stories survived in pockets. Appalachia, New England, Midwest towns where people still tell stories in basements during snowstorms. But now, they're returning. Because podcasts, TV shows, and storytellers around the world are rediscovering what the Victorians already knew. The ghost belonged to winter. A winter ghost tale. Before we close, I want to share on one winter ghost story, one that's never been published. It was emailed to me last year from a woman named Lena from Wisconsin, and she swears it's true. Lena grew up in a farmhouse built in 1863. Every Christmas Eve, her grandmother insisted on lighting a single candle in the upstairs window. When Lena was 9, she asked why, and her grandmother said, "Because he comes home tonight." Lena thought she meant Santa, but she didn't. That night, Lena woke up freezing. She saw her breath, and outside her bedroom, she heard the sound of someone breathing. Slow, deep, as if just standing inches away. She hid under the covers until morning. When she told her grandmother, the old woman nodded and simply said, "That's why we light the candle, so he knows where to go." That night, the candle stayed lit until dawn. But it was the next year, when a storm blew out the candle, that Lena heard footsteps come up the stairs. She says the wood creaked like someone heavy, someone cold, walked right to her door and stopped. She didn't sleep that night. The next morning, her grandmother relit the candle with trembling hands. Lena asked her, "Who is he?" And her grandmother answered, "Your great uncle, the one who died in this room. He comes home every Christmas. He always has." Winter is a season for remembering, not just loved ones we've lost, but the traditions left behind. Ghost stories aren't morbid, they're human. They're how our ancestors understood the cold, the dark, and the long silence between the years. And maybe, if you find yourself sitting by a fire this December, you'll tell me one too. Not to scare, but to keep the old ways alive. Because winter has always had ghosts. We're just starting to hear them. So whatever holiday you celebrate, just leave a light in the window, just in case someone's coming home. So join me now around the fire as we sit back and tell more haunting tales of holiday seasons past. Imagine, if you will, soft radio static. The sound of an old analog tuner sweeping across the station. Half-caught voices flickering in and out. Among these voices is a caller with a distorted and faint statement. I've done something horrible. There's a sudden click, silence, then the hum of the old radio equipment. There's a certain kind of fear that only exists in sound. A story you don't see, only hear. A voice that shouldn't be there. A broadcast that flickers across the airwaves just once before disappearing forever. They are called the lost broadcast. Stories of tapes the public was not supposed to hear, or maybe ones that were never supposed to exist at all. Tonight we're diving into two of the most enduring legends: the Chicago Cannibal radio show and the so-called Lost War of the Worlds broadcast. Two stories half a century apart, both supposedly aired and then vanished. But why do these legends stick with us? And what does it say about the kind of stories we want to believe? Part 1. The Chicago Cannibal Radio Show. Chicago is a city built on stories. Crime stories, ghost stories, political scandals, lakefront mysteries, and a kind of gritty nocturnal folklore that only thrives in big cities with big shadows. But late-night Chicago radio has a special place in local mythology. College stations, pirated stations, experimental and performance art broadcasts that blur the lines between the surreal and the absurd. And somewhere in that messy analog landscape, we get the legend of the Chicago Cannibal Radio Show. A broadcast so disturbing, people say it aired once, late at night, and then vanished. No archive, no recording, not even the station's name, just the story. The legend. The story usually begins sometime in the late 1980s or early 1990s. A sleepless listener is dialing around the radio trying to catch the end of a local talk show. It's one of those programs that feels almost too quiet. Two people talking in the dark, the host half whispering into the mic. It's the kind of show only insomniacs and night shift taxi drivers ever hear. And that night, a caller gets through. The man on the line sounds calm, polite even. He says he wants to confess something. The caller states, "I don't know what else to tell. I don't know how to stop." The radio host laughs, thinks it a bit strange, a prank, maybe a college kid with too much free time, but then the man keeps talking. And what he says gets darker. He talks about living alone in a high-rise building, talks about how he can hear his neighbors, but they never hear him. No one visits, no one asks questions. And then he talks about the freezer. He states, "I keep it in cuts, wrapped, labeled. I've been doing this for years. Nobody's even noticed." The host starts to panic. You can hear him trying to steer the call back to sanity, back to something, anything that sounds like a joke. But the caller starts describing things that a normal person wouldn't know. Corpse decomposition, bone removal, tissue preservation. Too calm, too detailed. And then there's a sudden burst of static, loud enough to disrupt. The broadcast cuts. Music plays, a harmless jazz track. The host never mentions the call again. The station denies it ever happened. And as the legend goes, the tape was confiscated before sunrise. Folklore researchers classify this as a dark confessional legend. A stranger calling into a radio show to expose a hidden horror. Stories like this show up in New York, Seattle, Los Angeles, but Chicago's version is the most persistent. Why? Because Chicago has something that other cities don't. A real broadcast mystery. That's the 1987 Max Headroom signal hijacking. A very real moment when somebody broke into Chicago's TV airways wearing a Max Headroom mask. No one knows who did it. No arrest. No tape of the person unmasked. It's a perfect breeding ground for broadcast paranoia. There are no named stations, no transcripts, no surviving recording. And that's exactly why people believe it. Lost audio invites imagination. Missing tapes invite conspiracy. When there's nothing to check against, the story becomes whatever scares us most. Chicago's legend is intimate, personal. The horror is one man. But our next legend, it's about a broadcast that supposedly terrified an entire nation. And a version of it that some people swear was never meant for the public at all. Part 2. The Lost War of the Worlds broadcast. A real 1938 broadcast. It was October 30th, 1938, the night before Halloween. Orson Welles and the Mercury Theater perform a radio adaptation of A.G. Wells' War of the Worlds. But instead of telling it like a normal story, they stage it as a breaking news bulletin. Interruptions, fake reports, on-the-ground correspondence. It's brilliant, it's terrifying, and some listeners panic. Not as many as the newspapers claimed. They exaggerated the hysteria to make the radio look irresponsible, but enough for the broadcast to become a legend. Here's where conspiracy steps in, because decades later, people began whispering about a second version of the broadcast, a darker version. A version so horrifying, it was supposedly censored, burned, or destroyed. Listeners claim they heard descriptions of burning bodies, children screaming, cities melting under heat rays. And now they claim that CBS destroyed the original master tape. Another myth claims that the show originally included real National Guard radio chatter, emergency frequency alerts, militarized language too close to official broadcast, and the government forced CBS to pull the recording. Some say the first hour was originally longer. More attacks, more interviews, more chaos, a version pulled from the archives for public safety. The problem is, they say that none of this ever happened. In fact, we still have the original script. We still have the production notes. We still have the actual transcription disc. There was no destroyed master, no confiscated reel, no longer darker cut. The conspiracy lives because the real broadcast was already so realistic. People imagine there must have been something worse. We assume that if something caused panic, there must be a banned version. And that assumption that there's something hidden just out of reach is the root of the lost broadcast myth. Unlike the Chicago cannibal legend, which is about one hidden monster, the war myth is about society. a belief that the public is fragile, that the government might censor dangerous media, that the truth might be too frightening. These myths survive because they tap into fears of media manipulation, secrecy, unseen authority, collective vulnerability. And that leads us into a bigger question. Why do so many conspiracy theories begin with a missing tape? Part 3. The lost broadcast phenomenon, the archetype of forbidden media. Lost episodes, missing tapes to banned films, erased broadcast. We're obsessed with media we can't access. Because missing audio, like missing evidence, creates a narrative gap. And when there are gaps, the human mind fills it. And when there are gaps, the human mind fills it with whatever scares it most. When you listen to a lost broadcast story, what you're really hearing is the empty space where the truth should be. But here's the thing. These myths wouldn't work without real-world precedent. Chicago really did have a broadcast hijacking. Radio really was ethereal for decades. Thousands of broadcasts from 1920s to the 1950s are genuinely gone. Governments really have pressured media companies to soften broadcast. And during the Cold War, emergency broadcast really did blur the line between drill and disaster. The real and the legendary get tangled into a single thread. And now, online, these myths mutate. Message boards add more details. YouTube channels produce dramatic recreations. People swear they remember hearing a version that never existed. That's when the Mandela effect creeps in. The confident claim, "No, I remember it differently." 1,000 imagined memories become a kind of false evidence. And suddenly the lost version feels more real than the documented one. So why do these stories stick with us? Because lost audio gets us to imagine the worst version of events. The Chicago cannibal call feels real because it could have happened. The War of the Worlds lost broadcast feels real because we want to believe there's a darker truth behind the panic. In the static between stations, the human mind becomes the broadcaster, because somewhere out there, maybe, is a recording that you weren't supposed to hear. And maybe that's why we keep searching. Imagine this. You're living in the 1950s in America. You've got your radio on and the announcer says you're listening to WKXR, the station that hears even when you whisper. All of a sudden, static comes in. It grows distorted. And an unknown voice says, "Stop listening." All of a sudden, the station abruptly cuts. Welcome to a different kind of Thanksgiving special. Tonight, we're pulling up a creaky wooden chair to the dimly lit ancestral table. The kind that's covered in lace, dust, and stories whispered when the younger cousins finally fall asleep. We're going to explore 3 tales, stranger than folklore, older than family recipes, and just unsettling enough to make you glance at the attic door before bed. This is the harvest that hears you. A Thanksgiving anthology of true stories, half-truths, and things families only talk about after the second slice of pie. Story 1. It's 1987. You hear on the car radio a warning. If you're out by County Line Road tonight, stay clear of the fields. Reports of knocking, repeat unexplained knocking heard just before midnight. The tape hissed. The door in the corn. The story comes from rural Nebraska, a place where the fields are so wide and flat you can see a storm rolling in from 2 counties away. But storms aren't the only thing that moves through the cornfields. Our storyteller's name is Aaron, and he swears what happened to him didn't just change Thanksgiving for his family. It ended it. Aaron says, "My dad used to host Thanksgiving at his farm. Every year, big thing, 20, maybe 30 of us crammed into the house, kids running wild, adults drinking boxed wine, the normal stuff. But every year, someone mentioned the sound. My grandma first, then my uncles, then my cousin. They'd say, 'Did you hear that? Out in the corn?' But the moment someone tried to listen again, nothing. Until 2 years ago. And it was the day before Thanksgiving. I was helping Dad fix the old combine when we heard what sounded like a knock. At first we thought it came from the barn, but no, it came from the field, from inside the corn. 3 knocks. Slow. Deliberate. Aaron and his father walked towards the sound. The tall, dry stalks made everything look identical, the maze no one had designed. We found a clearing. I swear it hadn't been there the day before, and in the middle was a door. Just a door. No frame, no building, just standing upright in the dirt like someone planted it, with lights flickering underneath. My dad said, "Don't touch it." I said, "I think someone's inside." Then the door knocked back from the other side. The next moments are fragmented, distorted, because Aaron says the door began to breathe, like it was inhaling the cold air, exhaling heat. The corn bent inward toward it like they were listening or bowing. And then it opened. Aaron said there was nothing inside, just black. Not darkness, but black, like ink. Dad grabbed me and said, "Walk away, don't look back." And we did. When we reached the edge of the fields, the door slammed. That night, knocking came from inside the walls of the house. Thanksgiving morning, the entire family arrived, loud, cheerful, blissfully unaware of the thing in the corn, until they heard it. Aaron says, "My cousin Emily asked, 'Who keeps knocking?' No one answered. And then she pointed out the window and said, 'He wants to come inside,' but there was no one there. Just corn moving against the wind. After dinner, the knocking became pounding. The family panicked, argued, screamed, and at 2:14 a.m., according to Aaron, every door in the house opened at once. No one slept. No one stayed for leftovers. And the next year, for the first time in 3 generations, Aaron's family didn't return for Thanksgiving. Aaron said his dad sold the farm the next spring. The new owners bulldozed the corn. But last month they called him. They said a door showed up in the middle of their soybean field. The man who ate grief. Our second story reaches back further into Appalachian folklore. The mountains hold a strange tradition, sin eating. The belief that a person can absorb another's sorrow, guilt, or cause by consuming food placed on a body. This is a Thanksgiving story about the last known sin eater and why his descendants refused to celebrate the holiday. His name was Elias Cotter. a quiet man, lived in a shack halfway up by Briar Bridge. Folks avoided him, said he walked with shadows. On Thanksgiving in 1891, a young mother named Abigail Pike died suddenly. Her family, desperate and terrified, broke taboo and called Elias. Elias said, "I ain't done it in years. You pay the price, you live with it." But they begged. They had 2 little boys, skating like puppies. They placed a plate of food, bread, salt, a slice of cold ham on Abigail's chest, and Elias began to eat. The ritual should have ended there, but Elias froze because he wasn't tasting ham. He was tasting fear. Elias stated, "I tasted her last breath. I tasted her running, like something chased her right out of her body." He staggered back, choking, and then whispered, "She didn't die natural. She died scared." That night, every animal on the farm screamed. Chickens thrashed, cows kicked their stalls, dogs howled at nothing. And the Pike family heard footsteps outside circling the house. The next morning, Thanksgiving Day, they found tracks in the frost. Not human, not animal, but something in between. Elias said, "It weren't chasing Abigail, it was falling in her grief." Elias took the 2 boys, hid them in the cellar, and sat at the kitchen table alone. He placed a plate of food in front of himself and whispered, "Come and eat me instead." The Pike family heard the chair slide. They heard the table creak. They heard Elias's scream. But when they opened the door, the chair was empty. Just a plate, scraped clean. From that year onward, the Pikes never celebrated Thanksgiving. They believed some hungers shouldn't be fed. The 1 seat left empty. Our last story is modern, suburban, the kind that starts normal enough to feel safe until it doesn't. It comes from a woman named Julia, who grew up outside Boston in a house with too many hallways and too few lights. Julia said, "My parents had a tradition. Every Thanksgiving, 1 extra seat at the table. They said it was for whoever needs it. I thought it was a charity thing, like symbolism or something. It wasn't." Julia said, "When I was 8, I asked Dad why we kept doing it. He froze, my mom went pale, then Dad said, because he notices when we don't." Julia thought he was joking until the year the chair wasn't set. Thanksgiving 2006. Julia said, "We forgot. We just forgot. No one noticed until dinner, and that's when the doorknob to the basement started to turn. Slow, then faster, like someone trying to come up." Her father, trembling, set an empty chair at the table, and the doorknob stopped for a moment. Then the chair pulled back on its own. Julia said, "Something sat down. The cushion dipped. No one breathed. Then the utensils began to move, one by one. A knife, a fork, a spoon, as if invisible hands were checking them. Julia said, "My mom whispered, 'Please just eat,' but nothing on the plate moved. Then the thing, whatever he is, turned its head toward me. I didn't see it, I felt it, like cold breath across my cheek. That's when Julia fainted. When she woke up, her father was burning the tablecloth in the backyard, her mother was sobbing, and the chair was gone. Julia said that next year, we set 2 extra chairs, just in case." Thanksgiving is a holiday built on gratitude, but also on tradition. And the truth is, we never really know why our families do the things they do. Maybe it's harmless, maybe it's superstition, or maybe, just maybe, these rituals keep something ancient, hungry, or grieving, or patient at bay. Remember that this year, when you sit down at the table, and if you hear knocking, be thankful. that it's not for you.